Hello there, folks. My name is Spoonks, and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the show where I break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was Five Nights at Freddy's, making $3.5 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $132 million and a worldwide total of $284 million. So this film took yet another hit this weekend. It fell 60% prior to the last weekend, which is just not a good hold. This movie just has had some of the worst legs I have seen in quite some time, especially for a horror film. You'd think it would start picking itself back up. Maybe some of the FNAF fans would be seeing this more than enough times, or maybe some of the general audience would be going to give this a chance, but no, it doesn't seem like the word of mouth really helped this movie out a lot. But still, this movie has made enough money to quantify it as a huge box office success. Again, this is the biggest horror film of the year domestically and has now officially surpassed The Nun 2 worldwide to become the biggest horror film worldwide, which is exceptional, especially for a movie on a $20 million budget, being just like at $284 million worldwide on that budget. This movie is already more than profitable. So yeah, even though this movie has had really bad legs, really bad word of mouth, it is still undeniably a huge box office success and will leave the top 5 as such. So yeah, one of the more interesting box office runs I've seen on this show lately. It had bad word of mouth, but yet it still was able to be hugely successful. Very interesting thing to see here. Number 4 was The Marvels, making $10.1 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $64 million and a worldwide total of $161 million. Oh boy, where do I begin with this? This, folks, there's no sugarcoating this. This was just a disastrous performance for The Marvels. It took a huge hit this weekend, falling 78% from last weekend. And this is not a scenario like Five Nights at Freddy's where, the opening weekend was huge enough and the movie's still gonna be very successful. No, the opening was bad enough, but this just was the icing on the cake for this movie. This movie is in serious danger. It's looking like this is going to be Marvel's first flop. Now, it's not like Marvel's hasn't had any bumps in the road. They had some underperformers, like Ant-Man and the first Incredible Hulk, but this is looking like it's going to be its first big flop. At least those movies were still huge money makers. This is still in serious danger. This movie has a huge budget. I don't know the official one, but it's said to be around $220 to maybe even $270 million, which is huge, and the film still has yet to surpass $200 million in its second weekend. Obviously, there was a lot of competition, so much so that before the actuals came in, this movie actually tied with another movie, but more on that later. But still, I just think the fact of the matter is that word of mouth has been absolutely terrible, and no one really wants to go check this out. There was just not a lot of interest to see this movie. I think a lot of people are just waiting to see it on Disney Plus, and those who have seen it in the theaters aren't really encouraging others to go check it out. So yeah, unfortunately, this is looking like a big flop for Marvel. This is just an absolutely terrible performance for this movie. I don't know how this movie can recover from this, unfortunately. Again, hopefully it finds a second life on Disney Plus. Maybe it'll gain some sort of cult following once it releases there, but as far as its theatrical run, it ain't looking too good. Number 3 was Thanksgiving, opening with $10.3 million this weekend domestically and $12 million worldwide. So yes, folks, this was the movie that was tied with The Marvels earlier on Sunday, but when the weekend actuals came in, it was this movie that was able to gain the high ground over The Marvels, which is absolutely insane to think about. This violent, gory, bloody slasher film getting the jump over a big MCU film. That's just crazy. Imagine telling yourself that 4 months ago. But anyways, in regards to this movie, it had a pretty successful opening overall. The movie only costed $15 million to make, and it's made most of that back already. It's sure to make that back by the next couple days, I'm sure, especially with Thanksgiving coming around the corner. I think that's going to be one of its biggest days, absolutely, especially with, well, the title of the movie. And it also adds to horror's excellent year thus far. Again, it's another solid opening for a horror film. These movies don't cost that much, so I'm sure this is gonna be able to double its budget back, even if Thanksgiving isn't as popular around the world as it is in America. I still think this movie is going to be able to be a pretty big success overall. It did get a B- on Cinema Score, which is typical for a horror film, and I think if it's able to tap into that, Terrifier 2 or maybe even the Talk to Me audience, it can manage to become a sleeper hit, maybe gain some word of mouth and solid buzz around it, especially around this time of year. I do wonder how it's going to do after Thanksgiving comes and goes, because the other big holiday is going to steal Thanksgiving's thunder, and I'm not sure if enough people are going to want to see a Thanksgiving movie during the Christmas season. But still, this is a very great start for this movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it does this weekend. So yeah, once again, great start for Thanksgiving. Number 2 was Trolls Band Together, opening with 30 million domestically, and including the early access showings numbers, that adds to a domestic total of 31 million and a worldwide total of $107 million. This is the third biggest opening for an animated film this year, topping Elemental and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, but still sitting behind Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and the Super Mario Bros. Movie. It is also the fourth biggest opening for a family film this year, once again topping Elemental, but sitting behind The Little Mermaid and the aforementioned Spider-Verse and Super Mario Bros. So as I expected last weekend, this movie was able to exceed a lot of people's expectations. A lot of people weren't expecting it to crack 30 million, and yet it did. Once again, like with what happened with Paw Patrol, I felt like a lot of people really underestimated how much kids love this franchise, and they were more than willing to go check out the third installment in this franchise. And even though this opening is 16 million under the first film's opening back in 2016, I'd still say this is a solid enough opening, especially considering the second film was released exclusively at home due to the pandemic, and it shows that enough people were still willing to go check this installment out in theaters, and people are seeming to really like and enjoy it. It got an A on Cinema Score, which is on par with the first film, and it may give it the bump it needs this weekend. I think word of mouth is really going to help this movie out a lot, especially as we get into Thanksgiving weekend with a lot of kids out of school, and this being the first new animated movie in theaters since Paw Patrol. What is going to be interesting is how it faces off the competition. There is a new animated film hitting theaters this week. More on that later. So it will be interesting to see how this movie fends off against that. Again, it's already gotten positive word of mouth from audiences, so we'll see. I do think the quote-unquote battle between those two movies is going to be very interesting, but that is still something we're going to have to keep an eye out on. Worldwide, things are looking even more impressive. It has been released in some international countries for over a month now. I even saw that this movie even came out in October for some countries, which is interesting, and it's been doing very well overseas. It's already surpassed the initial $95 million budget and $100 million milestone worldwide, which is great. So all the movie needs to do now is get to the doubling point. We'll see how it does. Strong word of mouth, yet stiff competition. Going to be interesting to see what happens with this movie due to those factors. But as far as this movie's opening goes, it's off to a pretty solid start, and I look forward to seeing where it heads. And finally, let's end the video off with the number 1 movie of the weekend, which was The Hunger Games: Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, opening with $44 million this weekend domestically and $99 million worldwide. So while yes, this movie did come in a bit under the Marvel's $47 million opening from last weekend, this movie is still in a better position than that film, as this is a much less expensive movie, as it only costed $100 million to make, and it's pretty much made all of that back worldwide. So all it needs to do now is double that, which I think this movie will be able to do. It is right now the only major franchise blockbuster out right now that I think a lot of people are curious and interested about to go see. The word of mouth on this movie has been interesting. It got a B plus on CinemaScore, which is definitely concerning. It's the lowest CinemaScore rating in the entire franchise. I have heard mixed feelings on this movie, particularly about the ending, so it will be interesting to see how this movie holds in the coming weeks. But still, I think there is still enough interest and curiosity from the general public to go check this out, certainly more so than the Marvels, as once again, given that this is $100 million movie, a 44 million opening isn't really that bad, and I'm sure this movie's gonna get that Thanksgiving boost to give it a bit more help in the coming weeks. Once again, I do feel that because the movie was able to get a press tour before the SAG-AFTRA strikes ended, it was able to generate a lot more interest and buzz for this film. But I also think because it was a prequel with new characters, I do think kind of hindered like the must-watch ability for this film, as opposed to this being like a follow-up or a continuation of the Hunger Games with some of the old cast members back. That definitely kind of hindered this movie a bit, but still, once again, given the budget and given how much it's made on its opening, I think this is a decent start for the film. Of course, we'll see how the word of mouth is on this movie. Hopefully it's able to sustain good legs, but as far as its opening goes, I'd say it's off to a decent start. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this weekend, but we're not quite done yet, as we've got another week ahead of us and new movies hitting theaters. And this weekend we have 2 major wide releases hitting theaters this week, as since Thanksgiving is this Thursday, many movies are going to release on Wednesday as opposed to the traditional Friday to get a jump over the Thanksgiving holiday. So let's start off with Napoleon. This is a new historical drama based off of the life of the famous French revolutionist. Also, the second film from Apple TV Plus to get a wide theatrical release. And I think this movie has some stuff going for it. I don't think it's going to be as big as Oppenheimer for sure, but given the significance of the name Napoleon, and it's one of the few adult-oriented dramas hitting theaters right now, especially around the holidays, I think it's going to help this movie out. The marketing has been very solid, and I do think this is the movie that when your dads and uncles come out over for the holiday and they want to see something as opposed to the typical family-friendly stuff, this will definitely be the movie for them. So I also think that will be a factor in helping this movie out. So yeah, I'm expecting a decent opening, nothing great, nothing huge or anything, but something at least positive for this Thanksgiving holiday. And then there's Disney's Wish. Of course, the newest Disney animated musical, but it's also important as this is the movie Disney is celebrating their 100 years of Disney movie magic, their centennial, what they've been building up to this year. And I think this movie's definitely got a shot. I definitely think there is going to be a much bigger number here for this animated film than Elemental. The buzz does seem to be there, and they've certainly been promoting and marketing this movie much more than their last Disney film, Strange World, from last year. The songs I've been hearing a lot of people talk about, and with it being Thanksgiving, once again, I do think this movie is going to get that Thanksgiving bump. But like I was talking with Trolls, I do wonder how both these movies releasing in theaters so close is going to affect each other, especially with how Trolls has already gotten such a big positive audience response. I do wonder how that's going to affect this movie and how this movie is going to affect that movie. So that is definitely something to take into consideration. The competition and what, like I said, quote unquote battle these movies are going to have over the Thanksgiving holiday is definitely going to be something interesting to see and witness how they both affect each other. Maybe they can coexist in peace and harmony, or one of them will brutally massacre the other one. So definitely going to be an interesting thing to see in regards to both films. But as far as this movie, yeah, I think we're going to see a decent number here. I think an interest and anticipation is high here, and we're going to see a very solid opening weekend for the film. But we'll see how well this movie truly does, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.